Okay. All right, everybody. So welcome. It's Sunday night. I'm Valerie Sayer from Nutrition Connection Balance. We're going to be talking about a topic that's really important today. And I think there's a lot of miscommunication, a lot of myths around blood sugar in particular, because a lot of people think you have to be obese or be out of shape to develop some problems with blood sugar. And that's absolutely not true. So I am a registered dietitian. Okay. And I own my own practice. I've had a practice for 15 years, and before that, I ran a compounding pharmacy. I've kept up my license as a registered pharmacy tech license. I did a medical internship at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. I did my food science and nutrition degree at Florida State University. I now live in Florida, and I still have my practice in Illinois area. I have advanced medical exercise specialty through ACE. And then I also have done some natural bodybuilding shows. I've done some marathons, and I'm really passionate about exercise. And I'm an entrepreneur in a way that I like to think is hopefully really empowering to everybody, which is empower people through their health and through facts. So if we look at a lot of different things around food, we want to understand that food is always telling us and your body how to function. And your genes are really what respond to the instructions from many different places. And it comes from the diet, the environment, and your lifestyle. So the genes are the loaded gun, but it's the environment that pulls the trigger. And when we're talking about environment, remember, we're also directly talking about food, okay? So when we look at that, it's very important to recognize that. We all have a genetic code that are genes, but it doesn't mean they have to be turned on. And a lot of different things can turn them on, not just weight, not just poor diet, but environment, viruses, a lot of different things. And I always say, if you've heard me speak, and this is funny because I think it's funny, but a lot of other people don't really realize and think about it, but food is the only thing you're not ever going to give up your entire lifetime. It doesn't matter if you get a new degree. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what partner you have. It doesn't matter what your income is. You're always going to have to eat. So there are some commonalities, and it's kind of amazing that we really consider that one of the last things that we study. We'll put more time into even a vacation or even a driver's license than we will about our nutrition. So today, hopefully you'll learn a lot of different things. So I put this slide in because I was mesmerized by a few really honest people that I know well that said they really didn't even know that insulin was a hormone. Hormones are proteins or peptides, such as growth hormone or things like insulin or thyroid, or even steroid molecules like cortisol. So they're a hormone or actually proteins or peptides. And what they do is they're made in the blood, urine, and saliva, as well as within the cells. And what happens is they are made in one cell, and it communicates another cell to act, to do something, whether it's turn something on or off, important. Okay, so hormones are very important. But this particular topic, we're going to be talking about blood sugar, glucose, hormones, and conditions. And I'm going to make sure I don't go too fast. People that know me, I usually do a lot of slides, 50 to 100. I did not today. So hopefully you're going to walk away, whether you know a lot or you know a little, and have extremely good handle on what to start possibly doing and what to look for your own health and your family's health. So some of the conditions are high triglycerides. Everyone thinks of triglycerides as something that has to do with cholesterol. It's in a lipid panel, which when you get at your doctor's or you get through a finger stick, is cholesterol, LDL, HDL, and triglycerides. Triglycerides are the fat that float around in the blood that are directly affected by carbohydrates and a risk for prediabetes, full diabetes, and insulin resistance. So it's one of the easier ways to start assessing yourself to find out if you're even considered or concerned about blood sugar possibly. High cortisol. Cortisol is best tested by saliva. And then if we think there is a severe condition, there's only one disease that has high cortisol, which I've had 2 patients out of over 20,000 that have ever been diagnosed with it. So it's not very common. But then we use urine. So blood is not accurate. You have to do saliva, and you have to do it 4 times throughout the day. And then you also, if we think there's a disease, which is very, very rare, then I have someone do urine testing. Okay. Insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is where your body makes enough insulin, and your pancreas in particular is what makes insulin, but it can't get in. That could be because of body fat. That can be because of prescription medications. That can be because you've had chemo or radiation. There's a lot of different things that block your body's ability to have insulin work properly. It can be produced by the pancreas, but it's not working properly. Metabolic syndrome, we're going to talk about that one a little bit more in the next slide. Prediabetes, diabetes undiagnosed, type 1 and type 2. Usually the differentiation between type 1 and type 2 is if you use insulin or not, but you can use insulin with type 2 if it's uncontrolled or you have an infection, or again, often we think of type 1 as your body is not able to produce the hormones anymore. Okay. So how do you measure these? So I did get specific because, again, when I had a lot of questions around the professionals that asked me to do this lecture, I was mesmerized that not one of them could actually tell me what the numbers were. And these were medical professionals. So that's why I decided to do this and put this in here, because you're going to be on top of it, whether you're a medical professional is not, for your own prevention, your family, your children, your neighbors, anybody. So triglycerides, ideal is under 130. Clinical, they consider less than 150. If you already have it in the 120s, 130s, you already are going to have a good risk within the next 1 to 5 years, based on what I've seen with thousands of patients. And when I said those 20,000, that doesn't include being a registered dietitian. That's just since my compounding work, as well as 15 years in a private practice. I was a dietitian for many years clinically and other practices. So when we look again, you have a very high risk then of around the corner of developing diabetes. High cortisol, that's by saliva. That's because saliva shows the free active levels, and it's the highest in the morning, then it should go down at night. It's rampant today, and not just because of COVID and some lifestyle changes, for people to have high cortisol, especially in the evening. They're overworked, they're on the TV, they're on the computer till midnight, they're watching horror shows, they're working late, they're never offline, on social media, and all of those jack up cortisol in the evening. If you have high cortisol in the evening, it's another item that I look for, because if we don't get it controlled, it will turn into prediabetes and full diabetes. Fasting insulin, you want ideal under 10, and clinical, by most labs, are under 17. Sometimes we'll see 12, sometimes we'll see 24. I'm just going to tell you, by every integrative center, every research, even some of the genetic as well as prevention, we show ideals less than 10. It's very important to find out if you're resistant, that your pancreas is producing insulin, but it's sitting out in the bloodstream. It's not picking up the carbohydrates, the broken down glucose. Okay. And that's the simplest way to describe that. Metabolic syndrome, we're going to go into next one because you need a whole slide for that, because there's quite a few things. Prediabetes is a fasting glucose of 100 to 126. Hemoglobin A1C, fasting glucose doesn't matter if we know your hemoglobin A1C. Fasting glucose, even in my type 1 and 2 type diabetics, can be completely normal in the morning, because some people, when they don't eat throughout the night, they don't have a problem with glucose in the morning, or their medication's controlling it. Hemoglobin A1C never lies. Prediabetes is 5.61% to 6%. This is also in a blood test. It can be done by a serum puncture, here, or it can be done by the finger stick, just so you know. So that's another just good thing to know. So why hemoglobin A1C rules is because it tells us the last 3 to 4 months how much sugar is attached to your cells, your kidneys, your eyes, your heart, your limbs, your circulatory system, everything. So hemoglobin A1C takes precedent over glucose, okay, always, all right? Type 2 diabetes, and when we have full diabetes, it's fasting glucose over 126 and hemoglobin A1C over 6%. Okay, and then usually there's lifestyle that can happen, there's different nutrition things that can happen, there's oral medication, and of course there's also prescription and insulin injections. And then diabetes type 1 means your pancreas is not working anymore, and insulin is usually required. We may see that change in the future, but most of my patients have different types of meters. They have pumps. They have all sorts of ways now to measure that is at least a little bit better. We're going to go back to metabolic syndrome because this is what most Americans have. And it's kind of amazing. It just starts to fall in line in most people's 40s. If someone is more integrative and health conscious, it tends to be in their 50s and 60s. Okay, and it used to be someone in their 70s to 80s or above. So it is a problem again, and part of it is our less, you'll hear when we talk about activity and so on. But metabolic syndrome means your LDL cholesterol is too high, your insulin is too high. Remember, you're aiming for under 10. You have visceral obesity. That means you can look normal and closed, not have a big belly, but the fat inside your organ can be thick. And that's one thing my husband and I are always remarking about is it's amazing how we've gotten older, how our waist size is bigger. Even if we don't have visceral fat, that's where even organ fat starts to develop from aging, and we have to be more and more careful. Okay, high triglycerides, and then hypertension, high blood pressure. And all of these are different in how they react, but this metabolic syndrome has a very big impact on your energy systems and your mitochondria. We're going to try to keep that simple. And it has a chain of reactions that cause some other disturbances in your energy, in your kidneys. And then most people know, why do we want to prevent prediabetes and diabetes? Because it damages tissues. You have more than a 50% increased risk of any heart condition, an earlier heart disease, which is already the #1 cause of death in men and women. Then we have problems with kidney disease. We have issues with limbs as well as circulatory issues, and neuropathy, which is very painful in the feet and the legs and other parts of the body that usually move up. And then, of course, eyesight also. So very, very important to be looking at metabolic syndrome. It's something that I look for carefully in patients, and often they've never been told they have metabolic syndrome. And the good part about it again is when you can identify, you at least can work on something. So let's say someone's having a really hard time changing their diet. I just want to give you an example here because I have hundreds of patients with metabolic syndrome, and they feel very helpless because they'll just be put on a blood pressure medication, then a second one, then a diuretic, then a statin, and they're feeling terrible. And I say, you know what, while we're working on your diet and all the lifestyle pieces, let's work on one thing. How about if we work on triglycerides? They're like, oh my gosh, I'm addicted to carbohydrates. I just can't. I said, well, then why don't we look at what your omegas are or put you on essential fatty acids? They work 95% of the time with any of my patients. And when they feel successful, because maybe diet's hard and weight loss is hard first, then they feel like, okay, look at this one. It's under 130. All right, look at, I've got those 5 things. I already did one. Then we'll work on their insulin. So I think we're really too hard on ourselves. We can't just snap our fingers and fix everything. It takes a lot of work. But when you know specific objective data, you don't get so hard on yourself, and it's very hard to change habits, but they have a direct effect on your long-term health forever. So I hope that gives you an idea how I work. Here's my 3 boys, and they were in Amsterdam, Christian in the middle, and to the right is Dylan. They both turned 21, and they went over with John, and then Kent, there's 23. The reason I bring this one in is that it's a broken record with me when I work with anybody, whether it's a lecture like this to colleagues and friends and people I don't know, or whether it's to any of my patients and family, is you have to be active. If you want to prevent all of the top 10 diseases, one is you've got to strength train. And we're going to have a second slide on this about blood sugar and earlier mortality or death. You have to maintain muscle. Muscle's more sensitive to glucose. You want less body fat. You can walk and walk and walk and walk, and it's cardiovascular, but it does not have the same effect as strength training. We really want to do both. And if we're over 50, I'm going to tell you, you got to do all 3. Because if you can't lift your arm up, how do you put your clothes on? How do you get something out of the cupboard? We need functionality. We need stress reduction with Tai Chi and yoga and Qigong. We need mobility so we don't trip when we're walking or running or hiking. We want to burn calories that can help with weight loss, with the cardiovascular, and help our heart. But strength training and lowering your body fat internally, so we're not just talking about weight, because sometimes you'll weigh more when you strength train. I care about your circumference of your waist and your hips and your muscle maintenance. So here's an example of 3 reasons that are pretty darn strong. And there's lots of data on this. But as we get older, we either become emaciated and have less muscle, or we tend to be a little doughboyish, and we want to really be looking at each step, but understand what pieces can really help your blood sugar. So when you strength train, the muscle strength you have doubles your death risk. It's funny because today I was reading one of my medical journals. It was quoting this study again that I've had in here for a few years. In my Endless Energy and in my Aging Elegantly lecture in my website, especially the Aging Elegantly, this is a big one. Because people always say, well, I walk every day. I'm like, do you strength train? I want to see your bone density. I want to see the muscle holding your spine. I want to make sure the visceral fat is less. You've got to strength train. It also increases the brain-derived neurotropin factor. And we won't go into that. This is not a brain lecture, but we know cognitive issues, memory, depression, all these things are huge. They naturally go down with age, but they also go down with diabetes. So one way to offset it is strength training again and exercise. And then what else? It lowers insulin, it lowers glucose, it lowers triglyceride levels. And my rule of thumb is this, is we want all 3. That's your ultimate goal in the next year. But if you're doing none, it's to pick anything, and do 5 to 15 minutes. I remember when my dad was in the very first time he was in the hospital, he had an exercise bike. We brought it up from the basement and they told him to get on it 30 minutes a day. He couldn't even get on the bike. I'm like, our goal was first to get on the bike. Then it was to pedal for half a minute. By 3 weeks, he could pedal 10 minutes. So I said, okay, now you want to do 10 minutes 3 times a day. Sometimes when someone's not feeling well, the recommendations are not very practical. So remember, all or nothing is not how we think here. Every single step makes a significant difference to your health and your loved one's health. Every single thing you do matter, okay? And what's so nice, quite frankly, that's unusual about most health things is one of the most significant things is that blood sugar, insulin, triglycerides, cortisol, it can all be measured. Your waist circumference can be measured. I always just say, measure around your belly button. Your belly button doesn't move. Don't worry if you're high-waisted, short-waisted, just measure around your belly button. It's the easiest way, and you're looking for less inches for that visceral fat and the body fat, okay? So hopefully I've made that really exciting for you and want to exercise more. And if you're just walking or if you're only doing strength training and you're over 50, let's start adding some other things, okay? We'll do a nice ending lifting the sky exercise at the end. That's one of my favorites. It's a Qigong exercise just to wrap it up. So when we talk about blood sugar, obviously what we eat is important. So let's start with a broad view because again, most people have no idea what to do or they are into so many fads and so on that I want to give you things that are specific and helpful. And we'll get into a few categories, very specific, but at least you really know the facts, okay? So one, you want the more whole unprocessed food. What that means is Cheerios an unprocessed food? No. So do you see it in the field when you drive by? No, I still have not had anyone ever tell me they saw a Cheerios field. So right away, that just kind of helps you because we kind of rationalize, well, I really want this. Do I really want that? It's like, well, yes, we're going to all eat some processed food. We have to get our nutrition today. But we want to eat more whole food, okay? Like the avocado here, like nuts and seeds, preferably raw, okay? Think whole unprocessed food and really think about, okay, if you think about your whole week, how many unprocessed foods did you eat? Sometimes when I ask someone that question, they have not eaten one unprocessed food the entire week, not even a banana. I'm amazed, not even an egg, not even lentils and beans, which are a little processed because we're not getting them usually right out of the field, but you can buy them dried and so on. Lean protein, and we won't get into this too much because we don't want to have a discussion about whether we want to be a vegan or a vegetarian or we want to have animal protein. If you're going to have animal protein, you want to make sure that it's lean. That's where we want to make sure it doesn't have the skin. We want to make sure it has, if you're eating red meat, especially as older we get. We want less and less. I really say one to two times or less a month, and then we want words like loin and flank and round. We want the right fats. We want things like extra virgin olive oil. We want avocados. We want nuts and seeds. If you don't have issues around almond butter and peanut butters, good healthy fats. You may do well with eating 4 to 6 mini meals with blood sugar, high triglycerides, and insulin. You may do better with fasting, 12 to 16 hours. And this is where both of those tend to be very impractical for most people. So I usually start with calorie adjustment and portion control. And everyone says, oh yeah, they know it, but they don't do it. And again, think about this. If you, every single time you have, let's say a cup of rice, let's say if it's even whole grain or wild rice, and usually put half of your plate of rice and it's 2 cups. If you even do half a cup less, and let's say you eat rice 3 times a week, that's 45 grams of carbohydrate a week. 45 grams times 4 weeks is 180 less grams of carbohydrates. All carbohydrates, even healthy ones, are broken down into blood sugar or glucose, okay? And then if we're having a lot of trouble and you need significant results, we have a medical issue, your insulin's 42, very scary type of things, then we may need to limit carbohydrates to 30 to 130 grams. That is not if you're an athlete. That is not if you're extremely active. And again, that's where we really have to know more about you. But we want to give people some guidelines, because when they say, oh, that has high carbohydrate, all the time I'll say, well, they'll say something like, I'll say, well, I recommend that you do, egg white and an egg and a cup of strawberries, or do the complete shake. They'll go, oh God, that's so high carbohydrate. I said, what do you eat for breakfast? Oh, I had a banana, Cheerios, milk, and orange juice. And I said, that's 100 grams of carbohydrates. They don't even know that they're eating high carbohydrate foods. So we really want to use something like the Fitness Pal, myfitnesspal.com. And there's so many apps that are free. Myfitnesspal.com, I just find is easy. And quite frankly, the phone app is even easier. And you just start measuring. Maybe you're eating 300 grams of carbohydrates. And if you don't have blood sugar issues and your metabolic rate is high, that may be fine, especially if it's whole food, but it may not be if somebody has high insulin, high triglycerides, or high glucose. So again, we're looking at all of those factors. We want to really avoid fast food, or I call it fat food. The average American now spends 90% of their food money on processed food since COVID, 90% or more, 90%. So we can offer solutions through just a few suggestions, few recipes, few easier things, because there's healthier processed food and unhealthier processed food. We want to avoid trans fatty acids, because remember, if your insulin's high, your glucose is high, your hemoglobin A1C is high, I'm very concerned again. Why am I concerned? Because remember, your risk for heart disease is doubled as soon as you're pre-diabetic or have any of these other conditions or markers that are high. So we don't want you eating fake fats. And most fast food have highly refined carbohydrates. Even if somebody's eating chicken and they're eating chicken McNuggets, what do they come with? Breading. Then it's fried. And acrylamide, most people, if they're not afraid of diabetes or heart disease, they're afraid of cancer. Acrylamide is something when there's a fried food or a highly burnt food, but fried also, high heat on the wrong kind of oil, it's a known cancer-causing agent. So here we'll give people something like our kids, some kind of fried chicken and what have you. And you would never give them something that we know can cause cancer, can cause a blockage, and increase the risk of prediabetes or insulin. And I do have athletes, female and male athletes, that look credible, that have prediabetes, insulin resistance, and metabolic syndrome. It's shocking. And so we know that the number one contribution to disease and poor quality of life is fat food or fast food, processed food. So let's start talking about some specific things so that I motivate you, just like hopefully the exercise, right? We know we want you to exercise all 3 things, but we also really want you to know some helpful facts, because sometimes when you know facts, it's motivating. You feel more excited about doing a habit that you don't enjoy doing or takes a little bit of work. So this is one that breakfast matters. So with insulin resistance, remember your body's still producing insulin, but it can't get in or break down the carbohydrates to get out of your bloodstream into the cells. We show a quarter to a third of all adult Americans. Quite frankly, I do believe that's just statistics I can get. I believe it's a third to one half because we don't measure people. I have people all the time. I'm shocked. They've never had their insulin tested and they're having problems with triglycerides or body fat or other medical things. Half of our children are obese, but there's a 20% increase of insulin resistance if you don't eat breakfast. So when people talk about fasting, I am not a proponent of fasting in the morning. I'm a proponent of you fast from 4 o'clock on or 6 o'clock on, that type of thing. We want to fit it into our lifestyle, not what the medical facts are. So again, my concern is we want insulin resistance to be lower. And right there, you can decrease your insulin if you start eating breakfast. Now, what to eat, right? I already gave you my top 2 favorite breakfasts for anybody. If you're not a vegan or vegetarian, then an egg white or a few egg whites. If you're a larger person, 1 whole egg, not every single morning for a whole egg, and a cup of fruit, especially any kind of berries. You could put some vegetables in there. You could make an omelet with avocados, not cheese, that type of thing, or the complete shake. The complete shake is what all of our family does 99% of the time, all of our kids, my husband and I. My husband calls this the executive breakfast because he used to work as a financial advisor in an executive office. And he always said people's laptops were on their bellies. So executive breakfast means that it's a fast meal. You can't get any faster. Even if you're running out the door, you can take the packet of the powder, put it in a shaker, shake it, and drink it. I guarantee you it's faster than a McDonald's or a Starbucks line. It's an emergency snack. It can be an executive breakfast if you're a male. Some of our children, our male kids, as you saw, or our husband, he does 2 packets of complete because they're bigger. They're 6'2", 6'5", so they need a little bit more. If you want to make it fancy, you can make it in a blender or any kind of magic bullet and add some greens to it or add some nut butters or add some almond milk, and you can certainly beef it up the calories. It's got more than 24 plant foods now. It's water washed. It has a study where they show a change in end stage life cancer as well as immune markers, lowered heart disease, and that reason is because of the fiber. I focus on fiber a lot with insulin, triglycerides, because a lot of people, when their triglycerides or insulin or blood sugar is high, they are hungry all the time. That's why diet is not the first thing that I always focus on, because they feel so unsuccessful. They are hungry. They are very, very hungry. But if you start increasing your fiber through more whole foods or something like the complete shake, that's why I like the berries if you're going to eat egg whites and an egg in the morning, because you need some fiber. And the complete has 7 grams, and we need 25 to 35 grams a day. And I'm not a fan of oatmeal. I'm going to tell you, I'm not. It's not high fiber. It's 3 grams. And then usually people are adding milk and other things to it. It's a very high carbohydrate breakfast. So unless you're a marathon runner in the morning and running 10 miles, probably not. If we're in our 30s and above, we probably don't need that many carbohydrates for breakfast. So the complete, it's 140 calories with water. You could make it 200, with doubling or doing a pack and a half. And then you certainly can make it with our boys. Sometimes we make it 400 or 500 calories. It has a nutrition facts label, and most important, it has a low glycemic index. One of the things when I work with people that, even if they know fairly a good amount about diabetes, they have an insulin pump or they're injecting themselves, they have oral medication, I'm amazed they don't understand the difference between the quality and nutrient density of foods, like a lentil and bean or the complete shake, because the glycemic index means their blood sugar doesn't go up as high. So if you eat a handful of Skittles, or I like to say, because it's Halloween, I always say, if someone doesn't understand blood sugar, how about if I have somebody here eat a cup of candy corn? Oh, we're talking blood sugar, even that someone that isn't unhealthy, their blood sugar will go 200 to 400 within a few minutes. And we wonder why we feel like crap when we eat things that are that high glycemic index, juice, things that spike the blood sugar really fast. So we want fiber and nutrient density and quality. That lowers that spike and also has more time to make the person feel full. Because again, when someone has high insulin, prediabetes, higher hemoglobin A1C, they're not lying. They're hungry. Because it's like if you and I are at the gas station and you're not looking at me and you don't put the pump in the gas tank, you still got to spend 50 bucks, but your car won't run. So with somebody that's diabetic or high insulin, it's all spilled out in the tissues and in the blood. It's not getting into your cells. So you're hungry, you're crabby, irritable, very up and down moods. We want blood sugar like this. We don't want this. Any diabetic knows that tests their blood sugar. The worst thing is highs and lows. It's actually dangerous, right? Because they can go into coma. They can have too low a blood sugar. So quality and fiber is extremely important to insulin, triglycerides, and blood sugar. I promised you a few other facts so that you stay motivated. And I am a person that I don't like to give my opinion. People base things on their emotional opinion. I base things on facts. And one plan for one person is not the same for another person. So here's a fast mimicking diet where about 100 healthy people they looked at, where they particularly, let's see if I can make that smaller, had 2 arms. And just basically what they did with this study is they did 1,100 calories the first day and 700 calories for 4 days. It was plant-based. They took a multivitamin in this particular study, which I don't recommend. I recommend the Juice Plus, and they ate whatever they wanted the rest of the month. Now, this is very interesting, isn't this? Now, remember, they repeated this for 3 months. After 3 months, all the ones that had the 1,100 calories the first day, 700 calories the next 4 days, had lower body weight, less total body fat, lower triglycerides, and a 25% dropout rate. Here is why I think it has a really poor dropout rate. Is one, again, success breeds success. If I tell someone, okay, and they're eating 2,500 calories to go to 1,500 calories the rest of their life, it's difficult, especially if their insulin is high in blood sugar, because they're hungry. But if they can do something for 4 days and we're seeing their triglycerides go down or other things, they're motivated. They feel excited. Success breeds success. And this is based on science, not my opinion. Okay, so there are ways to do it without trying to be perfect as you're learning to do better. We're all human. We all have to have ways that we can start to do better. I love this one, the Shred 10. All of you were probably invited from someone that knows for sure about the Shred 10. If you don't know about it, this is not a Shred 10 presentation. Please talk to the person that invited you. I love it. Eat less crap, right? Crap. I mean, less carbonated beverages, refined sugars, artificial sugars, less processed food. What did we just talk about? Isn't it awesome? There's a program where they tell you what to eat with recipes and Facebook pages and all that. When it came out years ago as a registered dietitian, I looked at it because almost never do I have a program that I say, oh yeah, you can't do this, you can't do this. It works. One of the issues with the Shred 10 could be, and this is important, where every person's different. If they're one of those 10% of people that gain weight during the Shred 10, that means they have to start counting their carbohydrates or eating just less servings. And I would highly encourage them to test their insulin, test their triglycerides. They probably already have a metabolic issue around blood sugar. So because it's healthy, it's clean food, but because it is 50 to 80% carbohydrate, that's where it's another sign that someone could have something wrong with insulin or diabetes. They can still do the Shred 10. They just do double complete or triple, and they just make sure that they eat less servings of the carbohydrates. That's it. So, and then of course, eat more real foods, more fruits and vegetables, more vegetables if you have blood sugar issues, lean proteins, essential fatty acids, and drink more water. So it's a fantastic program. One of the things that I try to teach people is it's becoming more and more difficult today, and thank goodness the Tower Garden in my kitchen and my Tower Garden in my office helps me, but we want to learn how to start adding vegetables to every meal and snack. And it takes a lot of effort. And again, when I ask some of my patients who are very advanced, typically in education, in money, I'm still amazed how some eat nothing but processed food, or they eat no vegetables. or they eat a salad, or they say, yeah, I had a piece of lettuce on my sandwich that I bought at Subway. And I'm like, okay, what kind of lettuce? Well, I don't know. So we want to just start being cognizant to add a vegetable to every meal. I am very creative. I started going back to, John and I are laughing because my husband, because I started going back to thinking about what I used to do with kids, because we have to eat a little less now as we've gotten older. But man, we've got to have vegetables in there. So I'll make even some ground turkey, a very small amount, but I'll add banana peppers and red peppers and onions and mushrooms and zucchini. It is one of our favorite meals. Crushed tomatoes. Or again, if you have to get something fast, make sure you're looking at your tomato sauce for grams of sugar. 6 grams or less is considered lower sugar on a processed food, and then again, really look at, can you add vegetables to your smoothies, to your snacks, to your lunch sandwiches? Can you have a salad? Can you blend it into food? Can you make a green smoothie once in a while? The Tower Garden makes it a lot easier to do today, and vegetables do not spike blood sugar. It's one of the only food groups I can be sure of if it's a non-starchy vegetable. Now, starch means peas and corn, those type of things, and plant foods like potatoes and sweet potatoes. Still, for some people, you may have to watch portions. But any vegetables, leafy greens, green beans, zucchini, all that, we don't have to worry about that. If you have high insulin, prediabetes, diabetes, higher triglycerides, they do not affect the blood sugar. And I can prove that even when I work with a bodybuilder, wrestler, where we're measuring their levels and they're worried about their weight or body fat. We do not have to reduce the amount. So at least you've got a food you can eat more of. And again, when you add those to meals, you're going to be more full. So then we want to be cognizant about, why am I talking about supplementation in this lecture? Because each capsule that you take contains your medication, your treatment for each of the side effects. This is what usually it looks like, or it starts to end up looking like for people, unfortunately, as they get older or when they have a medical hit. One thing starts and it's just a cascade. I can tell almost always when someone says, yeah, I had this happen. I'm like, oh, you're on this, this, and this. They're like, how did you know that? I'm like, because that's what happens to almost every person if you don't take control. And remember, if you have something like metabolic syndrome, you have all those things, start with one. It's significant to your health. Then you add on to a second. Okay, so you may need medication to help you, but then start looking into these things so that you can start changing it and get your medications reduced. Because we want things that have real research, that are randomized. That means the researcher doesn't know who's taking what, that we know that it's in medical journals, that it's safe. The problem with prescription medication is they can help you and they can save your life, so I'm not against them, but we really need to use them as the last resort because they have side effects, all of them. And it's not a matter of if, it's when. When we look at things like the Juice Plus, it has health effects. One, if you take the capsules, there are no carbohydrates. And that's not true. There's little traces, but you don't have to count them. I'm just telling you because I've worked with thousands of diabetics, including type 1 insulin-dependent diabetics in my practice. They all take 2 red, 2 green, 2 purple Juice Plus capsules every single day. So because we have to watch carbohydrate counting and servings for some people, they often can't eat a lot of fruit. So we really want to make sure they're getting in their capsules and they're getting something that has research that actually affects different organ systems. And one of the most important for a diabetic is oxidative stress, because it affects the eyes, it affects the heart, it affects the circulatory system and the kidneys. And remember, Juice Plus contributes to cardiovascular wellness. Why is this important again? Because your risk is more, doubled or more, as soon as you have a metabolic issue around blood sugar. So again, we want to reduce your risks, okay? And again, people can do it. They can open all 6 capsules, put it in their smoothie in the morning like my daughter Heidi and I do, or you can swallow them, okay? You do not have to separate them. You can take them whenever you do it. The reason I have 90% of my patients put it in their shake or take it in the morning is they don't miss it. Sometimes when people take 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 at dinner, they're always missing a few. I always tell people, if you want results like the research, you've got to take it like the research. And then the research shows for all the different organ systems, 2 red, 2 green, 2 purple. There are also some chewables. Sometimes when I work with a diabetic and they have a terrible addiction to carbohydrates, or sweets, I'll start them on the chewables. And it's amazing how many people will tell me, don't do that. It's too high in carbohydrates. Well, even if they're having all 4 red, 4 green, 4 purple, we're only talking between 20 and 24 grams of carbohydrates. 1 serving of fruit, half a cup of rice is 15. And if they're eating candy and ice cream and snacks and Skittles, they're hundreds of grams of carbohydrates. If we could switch it, I'm a very open-minded person and health practitioner to get results for the person. And that way they can also be honest with you of what they can do and can't do. We talked a little bit briefly about essential fatty acids, but Juice Plus does have a really nice plant-based fatty acid. If you have insulin, prediabetes, or diabetes, the minimum you need to take is 4. And I'm going to tell you, based on testing, it's usually 4 to 6. Minimum. If you're on none, for goodness sake, get on 2. But if you have high insulin, high triglycerides, hemoglobin A1C, and so on, I'm just telling you, take 4 to 6. If you have high triglycerides over 200, you're going to need at least 4 to 6 if you want to stay plant-based. If you want to mix with seafood and the plant-based, then it's a different discussion. But even then, I measure people. I don't guess. So again, if your triglycerides are high, insulin's high, you have prediabetes, any heart issues, 4. 2 and 2. 2 at breakfast, 2 at lunch, 2 at breakfast, 2 at dinner, 2 at lunch, 2 at dinner. Try to separate them a little bit. The triglycerides come down 90% of the time with deficient essential fatty acids, and it works better than any medication I've ever used. So essential fatty acids are wonderful. You need to be on them, okay? They have lots of other benefits too. Here's an example. So when you take essential fatty acids, the FDA in 2019, yes, a very conservative agency that over 20 years, I've been recommending essential fatty acids. It shows it prevents hypertension and it directly affects heart health. Lowers triglycerides, lowers inflammation, and inflammation is what starts all disease, everything, including cancer. So essential fatty acids are important, not just for triglycerides. Here's a really simple, and I couldn't get it bigger, I'm sorry, this is where sometimes my skills aren't as good as I'd like them to be, but this particular patient I started seeing in 2016, their triglycerides were over 1,000. The very first test, 3 months later, we got him down to under 500. He'd been on many medications, couldn't get any. Then we got him down to 70. Then the doctor told him, oh, you shouldn't be taking essential fatty acids. He did not go off of it, but went down to half, and his triglycerides bounced up to 143. Got back on him, 109. Now just in June, back to 96. Again, remember, under 130. So he was really happy because sometimes we have to test. And, you know, we have to remember that nobody can be an expert in everything. So be careful what you ask your doctor. Be careful who you ask, what question, and the right person to ask. Okay. And you guys have learned a lot of facts today. So you've got good facts to share. Why do I also recommend the Juice Plus capsules for my diabetics and insulin resistant patients, and quite frankly, all of my patients, including my children athletes, are these 2 studies that I put in here? Because when we're talking about heart disease, people take supplements to prevent disease. So with postmenopausal women in a 160,000 study who took multivitamins, it showed it did not prevent cancer, heart disease, strokes, or reduce death. It actually showed mortality was increased. So again, we want health effects, not side effects. And we care about our men too. Men in the National Cancer Institute, in the Journal of American Medical Association, this has been out for a long time. Look at the year. I put this one on purpose, 2011. This is 2020. And we still have people being told to take extra E, take selenium, all this stuff. It increases your risk for men of prostate cancer and other heart disease risks, period. That's why I've always recommended the Juice Plus over a multivitamin. If you have a medical deficiency in a mineral or vitamin, that's different, but that's where you're seeing someone like me that's measuring your levels, and then we remeasure. I don't keep people on the same thing. The Juice Plus is food, okay? So we want health effects, not side effects. You want proven supplementation. You want to try to eat more nutrient-dense food, at least 10 servings of fruits and vegetables. And if you do have high insulin, triglycerides, or diabetes, I say no more than 2 to 3 servings of fruit a day. That means you got to eat more vegetables. And we want prevention and protection. Okay. So I'm going to wrap it up and with just a few things. I really think this slide is important. And I say it's important because people don't take health seriously enough. And if we look, US is last in all industrialized countries for health. We have the most expensive, and look at the numbers. It takes a while to get the numbers down of health expenditures. We're last in quality. Now, if you have a car accident, you want to be in the United States. But other than that, for disease, for prevention, it's a problem. And we're 5% of the population, and we take 80% of pain medications. Medical expenses cause 52% of all the bankruptcies. That's with people with insurance. So we have got to spend our money on the right things. If you're on a budget, there's always a way to figure it out. Take out Cheetos and coffee. Don't go to Starbucks anymore. If you have to, I had someone that got rid of their cable TV. They got their whole family on Juice Plus Complete and testing. You know, it's the value. But if you don't help people make the steps and educate them and give them choices, they don't even know they have a choice. They just think it's normal. Okay? So wake up. You know, wake up. Have a better body, have a better mind. Look at your environment. Be around people that support you, that are positive, that are trying, they're not perfect habits, trying to have better habits. Or if they have mishaps as human beings, they can admit it, because we all have them. No one wants to be around a perfect person. I don't think there's such a thing, even though someone may think they are, you know. And then we really want to take things like the Juice Plus that have the clinical studies and the nutrient density, but they also have immune studies. It's in a different time in the world today. If you got invited by someone, make sure you ask about the 4.5-minute video that they go over the 3 immune studies. It's spectacular. There are ways to not be afraid to get your immune system up, and nutrition is one of them. Disease and medications lower the immune system. Fruits and vegetables increase it. Okay. This is a metabolic marker test. One of the things that sometimes is really difficult for patients and friends and family that we have, they cannot get their doctor to measure these things. Oh, you're just fine. Look at you. I had an athlete over and over think had kidney pain and was a cyclist. The doctor just kept saying, oh, you're just fine. I finally said, you know, I did all this other testing, couldn't find anything wrong. Look at his levels here. He had insulin resistance. He did not have inflammation because he was on particular medication. He had diabetes. And you know, the doctor, when we went back to this with these levels, he said, yeah, but you look good. We're like, he couldn't cycle anymore. He was having kidney damage. It's like, didn't matter that he looked fit and he was a cyclist, you know, internally he was hurting. And what happened is a lot of endurance athletes, especially he was in his 50s, still cycling in Colorado and so on, you use up. Remember that mitochondria picture we showed with metabolic syndrome? When you overbreathe and overexercise and you don't have nutrition density, you're at much higher risk for wearing out the pathways that affect blood sugar. So he already had full diabetes and insulin resistance. And luckily, his numbers look nothing like this today. And he's on 0 medications to this day. But boy, was he upset at the doctor. You know, so we had to do this panel. The doctor wouldn't do it because he looked good. You know, he just did a fasting glucose. You know, his fasting glucose was not abnormal because he's a heavy exerciser. So really, this is a really good thing. One of the things I did for this clinic, we always have this. You do not have to be my patient to order this. If you can't get your doctor to measure the markers, you can do this through a finger stick. It does require quite a few spots of blood. So if that freaks you out, that's not going to work. But just so you know, if you can't get your doctor to test things, we have this panel at my office. And this is one of the few things you don't have to be a patient for in my clinics. And then you get a write-up on what to do. So it's a really helpful, but right there are all the markers we've been talking about. So I have all sorts of things on my website. Anyone that came to this lecture, you are invited by somebody that has a lot of knowledge. Go back to them for the Juice Plus, talk about the nutrient density, find out how you get the Shred 10 videos. They have a wealth of information on top of what I've given you today. We have all sorts of clinics at my office, but most importantly, on nutritionconnectionbalance.com under education, I have 8 recorded lectures. You'll see a little YouTube things at the front. Just go to bottom, older episodes, and then I have aging elegantly and bone density and men and women's hormones. And it's like this lecture, but even more detail so that you can really learn about a topic thoroughly, not based on myths. Okay. So why don't we end by doing lifting the sky? And then I'll turn this off and we'll do some questions and answers. So let's just stand up. So lifting the sky, and you can sit down. I guess maybe we should just sit down because then you're not going to be able to see me. But lifting the sky, you stand up and you just have your legs. You just maybe sit in your chair with your legs apart real gently. Put your fingers together like this. And then put it down between your knees. And have your eyes watch it as it goes up. And breathe. Bring your fingers back together, and it's by my knees. Normally we stand up, but I'm afraid I won't see you because I didn't get the camera right. Do the same thing, lift the sky, look through that beautiful hand that you have and that heart. It's a Qigong movement. You can Google it, you can look it up, lifting the sky. It's one of my favorites when I'm working or I feel a little worked up about something or triggered by something. It's such a simple exercise and it's a beautiful thing to do. So I think we all need to lift ourselves up, get our blood sugar in check, and support each other. So let me just stop the recording.